Welcome to the Rob Burgess Show. I am, of course, your host, Rob Burgess. On this, our 177th episode, our returning guest is Sarah Kendzior. You first heard Sarah Kendzior on episodes 70, 80, 89, 99, 112, 128, 138, 150, and 163. Sarah Kendzior is best known for her reporting on St. Louis, her coverage of the 2016 election, and her academic research on authoritarian states. She is currently an op-ed columnist for the Globe and Mail, and she was named by Foreign Policy as one of the 100 people you should be following on Twitter to make sense of global events. Her reporting has been featured in many publications, including Politico, Slate, The Atlantic, Fast Company, The Chicago Tribune, Teen Vogue, and The New York Times. Her book, The View from Flyover Country, Dispatches from the Forgotten America, was published April 17, 2018, and is now a New York Times-bestseller. And her new book, Hiding in Plain Sight, The Invention of Donald Trump and the Erosion of America, was published April 7, 2020, and is now a New York Times bestseller as well. You can listen to her podcast, which she co-hosts with Andrea Chalupa, Gaslit Nation. And now on to the show. Yeah, when you said, is this video, I'm like, yeah, I certainly hope not.
God, I've still been doing them. I've been doing television. And
wow,
I'm just
that's
like,
right, yeah.
Absolutely. Whatever. It's like that scene in Batman in the 1989 version where, like, the Joker poisons the cosmetics and hairspray and everybody looks horrible. That's what, like, television's been reduced to.
Well, I feel like now you're judged more on your bookshelf behind you. There's a whole like shelf rating system. I saw your stack of books.
Oh yeah, I had fun with that. But I remember at one point it was like a day where we were using this room simultaneously. My husband was using it as an office. I was storing my kids like extra stuff in it while I cleaned out my kids' room, and I was doing like, a television spot. And I'm just like, and it's a pandemic, and I'm like, and you're gonna judge the wall behind me, like that's what's on your mind. Like, my God, to have your life. Like, I mean, in some ways, at least, I don't know. I feel like there's sort of a little more acceptance of, like, parents that work from home and things don't always run smoothly, et cetera, et cetera. But what a way to get it.
Absolutely. It's not what I see someone say. It's not working from home. It's living at work sometimes.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And nothing changed for me in this respect. It's just everyone is home with me. Like,
right,
that's
exactly.
the difference. So.
Definitely. But are you guys feeling well? Everyone?
Yeah,
okay?
Everyone, I mean, physically is healthy. We started school this week. They're in like Zoom school or whatever. I don't even know. So that's been an adventure. Still working out some of those kinks there. But.
Right. Well, we just started homeschooling our oldest son. He's starting kindergarten, so he's very excited. So. Oh
boy. Well, yeah, because that's the thing is like for the little kids, it's very difficult. Like my oldest is fine. She's 13. She's handling it very well. My 9-year-old, like, this is not working. We have to figure out some way to get him to actually not just walk away from the quote classroom. So we'll see.
Yeah, definitely. Well, tonight I apologize in advance if I'm taking away from your watching of the RNC. I know.
God, I'm not watching that. No way. Hell no. I've sacrificed enough. I've toiled away. And, every night we have like what I call civics class where we watch the X-Files as a family and I teach my children important things about trusting the government. So, I guess they could learn those things from the RNC too. But I'm not giving up X-Files night for anything. So.
Well, fair enough. Yeah. I haven't really been watching either. I've just seen snippets, and it's just as horrifying and propagandistic, third world North Korean 1984 as you can imagine it being. So it's a lot to take even in small doses from what I can tell. But. Yeah,
and it's what I don't know, what I dreaded, what I expected, and I don't need to I see the clips that I need to see to do my job, and I don't need to see more is basically how I'm feeling. None of it surprises me, so it's not like there's some new insight to be gleaned here. But
Well, it's like how the RNC didn't have a platform this year. All they said was whatever the dear leader says is fine with us. And it's like, well, at least you're owning it finally. I mean, that's the first step.
They're incredibly blatant, and the media has not changed in any capacity. And that to me is the more frightening thing: is the responses, the response from the media, the response from the Democrats, the total supplication of the GOP, which is ongoing, but still. they're still covering it like a regular convention, but of course it's not. It's the proclamation of, dictatorship in a more formal way. It's dynastic kleptocracy. It's all the things I dreaded and said would happen, and people said I was nuts, and here we are. So, yay.
Well, and it's like, oh, well, Joe Biden has a 15-point lead. Nobody needs to worry. It's like, I don't know. Stop. They want to make it a horse race. The horse race people want it to be a horse race. They want it to be like every other election we've always had, where we can, who's ahead today? Who's getting close? Who can close the gap? And it's like, they're not treating it with the seriousness with which, frankly, they should have done last time, but are definitely not this time, and it's sad because we had a whole time to learn from it. So
yes, they had 4 years and they wasted them, and I kept thinking today of how much time they wasted, and I kept thinking in particular of how they wasted 2019 and all of these avenues toward accountability in terms of timing impeachment. I kept thinking, what if they had done it in the spring? What if we had had a prolonged series of hearings? What if they had gone for his financial documents? I mean, they really should have gotten them before 2016, but what if they had been vigilant and I don't know, and continuously pressed for accountability and for preparation for the election to come. They had 4 years to handle election integrity and make sure that the same mistakes weren't made in 2020 that were in 2016, which was, vulnerability to domestic voter suppression, foreign interference, unsecure machines, and of course, Trump not conceding. They had such a long time, and it was just endless denial and kind of feigned ignorance. And I mean, I don't know. At some point, complacency becomes complicity. And I think we passed that point midway through last year.
Well, and it's just like every little scrap they get thrown, they just grab onto it of like normalcy. They want so badly to be right on the narrative that so many people were pushing about, oh, he'll grow into the office changes you. Surely once he realizes the magnitude, and anytime that it's like he reads from a teleprompter for more than 5 minutes, or like I guess Melania's speech did something for some people, even though she was wearing the like fascistic garb, whatever. But it's like they're like, oh, now it's finally like, oh, presidential. It's like, and then tomorrow they're gonna like retweet, some white supremacist or something, and it's gonna be like, oh, never mind.
Yes, and it's really horrifying. And at this point, there have been so many psychological examinations into Trump, whether the work of like Bandy Lee or other mental health professionals, or Mary Trump, or people from the quote inside like John Bolton writing all of these tell-alls. There's been this endless array of documentation into his internal life, his sadism, his cruelty, his racism, his upbringing, so on and so forth. And a lot of that was already there anyway, because he's been a public figure for 40 years. The real story to me here are these good Germans, are these enablers in the press, in the Republican Party, in the Democratic Party. Like, why do you want to cling to normalcy when you know that what is directly in front of you is a white supremacist mafioso, is a kleptocrat, is somebody who just let 170,000 Americans die of COVID-19, and who feels nothing but maybe some glee at the opportunity to shake down states, to shake down, American citizens who are suffering and dying. Like, why do you want that to be normal? I mean, that's the question that I would want to ask them, especially when it's so, not easy, because you get a lot of shit for it, but to tell the truth here isn't hard, because you have the criminals confessing the crimes, and you have them doing it blatantly. You have them doing it as a form of pageantry. And so to simply describe what's directly in front of you, instead of what you wish was there, or these little things you're trying to find in there, these little semblances of kindness or dignity or decency, or however they want to qualify it, they're not there. Like, you're making that up. You're the ones trying to whitewash a white supremacist criminal movement, and I don't understand why they want to do that, in part because of the total lack of empathy and responsibility that it shows, but also they're digging their own graves. This is a consolidating autocracy. They don't look kindly upon journalists, even the ones that perform sycophancy early on. Everyone is disposable in this kind of situation, and I just don't understand the utter ignorance not only of history but of present day life that they seem to express.
Yeah, and you'd think if nothing else, the self-preservation instinct would kick in at a certain point. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't get it. I sometimes feel like, did you ever read Young Goodman Brown, the Nathaniel Hawthorne story about the guy? It's like, set in the Puritan era and the, witch burning era. And so, Young Goodman Brown is like all kind of excited because he's going into the forest and he's going to go witness like a satanic rite. But when he arrives there, he finds out that everybody in the town is already in the satanic group. Like, his reverend, his school teacher, his wife, like they all are secretly in this satanic cult. And so he's completely shaken. And then the next day he's not sure, like, did I dream it? Was it real? And his faith in life is shattered because everybody has betrayed him on a moral level, and he's constantly questioning everybody's morality and how low they would actually sink. That is how I have felt for like the last 4 years of this administration. Anyone who I thought maybe had some vestige of integrity or is going to fight for our country or is going to fight for our fellow citizens, in most cases, I've watched them be either complicit now or I've vetted them and I've looked into their past and found a pattern of complicity that I wasn't aware existed before. And so that's been a really disillusioning, demoralizing kind of experience. And these are, power brokers. This is the elite class, political class, media class. This isn't like all Americans or the majority of people or anything, but it's enough that, when I write a book that people basically tell them, is like a nonfiction horror novel that keeps them awake night after night. Like that book scratches the surface of everything that I've discovered about the people who control our institutions. And that knowledge it shakes me to the core.
Yeah, I didn't get a chance to say congratulations on New York Times-bestseller for the second time. That's awesome.
Thank you. Thanks.
Yeah. And I would, I remember last time we talked, it had just come out, and I think I asked you something about if you got frustrated having to turn it in and then you don't get to comment on stuff for a while and maybe it's out of date. I feel like everything in that book is just becoming more and more prescient. Epstein and then Kalimnik, and you see all these names that keep bubbling up, and it's like, oh yeah, remember that.
Yeah, it's a really weird thing. I mean, I felt like I wrote about the future in the past tense, and that was a very strange thing to do. I wrote the book in 2019 knowing when it would come out, and it's a history in most respects, but I knew that as a history, it was something that a lot of people would not necessarily see the relevance of until events began to move forward. And, I went through this when I was writing the book, like when I had a chapter on Epstein, and it was before, he had been arrested and became a big national story. Like there'd been a little bit of coverage, but not that much. And my editor initially was very confused, like, why is this person so central? And I was like, just trust me, he is. And that happened with a lot of other things, that actually they all wanted to remove. Cyrus Vance, Kalimnik, I'm trying to think, the phrase, it's a transnational crime syndicate. There are a lot of things that, Macmillan and its lawyers did not want in this book. They made it through because they can be objectively proven. And, what are they going to do? This was the thesis of the book. I certainly wasn't going to abandon it, and thankfully my editor stood up for me as well. But yeah, it's people who've read it, they recognize these names in the news and they know what the underlying story is here. And of course, I don't fully know that story. That's why I've been pushing for investigations and for hearings, because I think there's a lot that I don't know, and there's certainly a lot that the American public doesn't know. But unfortunately, my book did not become dated. It became more relevant. And I'm looking forward to the day where it goes out of style, and hopefully not, because we're in a fully fascist society and people are learning how to like burn a Kindle, but I don't know. We'll see.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, yeah, it's, did you read much of the Senate report, I mean, it seemed like not old news necessarily, but it kind of just confirmed everything that was already understood.
It
Yes,
was
Paul
old
Mann.
news. I mean,
Right.
it seemed to be cribbed from open source documents. They seem to be using a lot of the
Hmm.
same materials I used and that other authors who've covered these topics have used. They didn't seem to have done much of an investigation in their own right. And of course, they didn't release it in a timely manner. They didn't pursue it. I mean, it was an intelligence investigation. So, you know, in terms of the role of law enforcement, that's a separate thing. But yeah, that was no blockbuster report. You know, in Gaslit
Hmm.
Nation, we were like subtitled, you know, Holy Mother of Duh, because we knew everything in there. When they were like talking about Manafort and Kalimnik and
Yeah.
the press was reporting that as new, I was like, am I hallucinating? Like, I could swear to God, I wrote about this in my book in
Hmm.
2019. And like, I look in the index and I'm like, oh yeah, it's there, you know? And I'm like, this is insane. Like, these are our senators. They should be more up to date and you know on the ball here than anybody. Like, how in the world are they this behind, and how is the media so behind that they're treating this old information as new or surprising? And I sometimes wonder like that it's got to be an act. Like, people cannot be so universally stupid. So at this point I think a lot of people are feigning ignorance, particularly if they hold elected office, because if you feign ignorance, then you're not accountable for doing anything. You can just keep pretending that you didn't know and you're so surprised, and so on and so forth, and you never have to actually answer the demands of your constituents.
Yeah. Oh, imagine if impeachment was still going right now, though, and like slowly, that would be so. I'd love that the headlines and the endless testimony, and there's no reason for them not to do it. And it's insane to me that what are they out until like September? What, middle of September? They're not coming back to Washington
Yeah,
either.
they don't
There's
care.
no
I
sense of
mean,
urgency whatsoever. People are dying. People are getting kicked out of their houses. Their lights are about to get cut off, and people unemployment is running out, and it's like, I don't know. Don't get to
yeah,
it.
they had to be dragged, or it was really Pelosi had to
Yeah.
be dragged back, kicking and screaming, to have hearings over the U.S. Postal Service, which is, you know, an essential institution at any time, but during a pandemic and an election, obviously, is a critical resource. She didn't care, you know, in the same way she had to be dragged, kicking and screaming, to impeach. I do think there are members of the House that are deeply frustrated with this situation and with her. You know, they tweet about it, and I'm like, please do more than tweet. And they basically are like, she won't let us. Like, she won't let us use our powers, the powers of the purse, inherent contempt, impeaching officials like DeJoy or Barr, or cutting their funding. She won't let them do that because all of her actions have been aimed at protecting Trump. And that's been true from the moment that she took over the House. I don't know exactly what happened in the shutdown, but uh, you know, that was the last time I think she really fought back. And when she announced in March 2019 that she intended to never impeach him, you know, no matter what he did, that was a very dark moment. It coincided with so many other things, with Manafort getting let off the hook by a judge that had been threatened. You know, and he said that Manafort, a career mobster, had led a, quote, otherwise blameless life. You know, the Roger Stone jury was being threatened. Barr had shut down the Mueller report. All of these things are happening at the same time. And when she came out with a smirk and said, you know, we're not impeaching. And it was the demands of citizens on their representatives, and then the demands of those representatives on Pelosi, that allowed impeachment to move forward. And I'm watching the same thing play out again now with the Postal Service. And now that, you know, I'm watching it play out with election integrity, with you know, responses to mass poverty, to a Great Depression economy, to mass evictions. Citizens are demanding, like, please, you know, do your jobs. Like, for God's sake, you know, we are dying, and we're also on the verge of losing our representative government. So this is your last chance here. And on the whole, you know, they're unresponsive, and the ones who are responsive are saying that, you know, she and other you know, committee heads and whatnot, power brokers within the House, are holding them back from actually helping American citizens.
Hmm. That kind of leads into something else I wanted to talk about with the DNC. I did think it was of note that AOC spoke for 60 seconds, and John Kasich spoke for more than 60 seconds, I would guess. How do you feel about, because it's like this is always the Democrats' problem. I feel like they're always always just playing a Republican in a bad suit sometimes, and it's like Republicans around here that I live around know which party if they want to vote for a Republican, they're going to do that. So you don't need to
Exactly.
be like them. Don't.
Yeah, I thought it was misguided and a terrible decision on so many levels. Because first of all, as you said, they're not going to win over these Republicans. I don't think there's some big group of undecided voters. I even think people who may have voted Republican in past elections, they abandoned Trump long ago. They're not sitting there like hemming and hawing over what to do. So and even if there was, that would be a very small constituency. What's a large constituency are young people, who often don't vote, who may feel deeply disillusioned by the total lack of accountability of the House once it took power. There are a lot of people that are saying, why did I go out and vote in 2018? And why should I risk my life, quite literally, to vote in 2020 if all the Democratic Party tells us is go vote and eventually, maybe someday, we'll do something to help you. And in the meantime, we're just going to raise a ton of money off you and keep asking you, for money. And, I got a flyer from Pelosi the other day asking me for money for the DCCC, and I, tore it up like she tore up Trump's speeches, because it was a symbolic gesture on my part, because I have no actual ability to get her out of office. I do think she needs to be removed if we're able to move forward. But yeah, incredible wasted opportunity. I thought the convention itself, it wasn't quite as bad overall as I thought it was going to be. There were some effective speeches, but the minimalization of AOC and of other younger progressive voices, people like Julian Castro, who ran for president, or Katie Porter, who's been a very effective communicator. And these are the people who are basically giving anyone like under 45 hope in the future and in a future competent elected representation. That is why these legacy politicians, seem to be increasingly primaried and voted out of office, because we've lived with this for 2 decades and we've watched our country fall apart under their stewardship, and people are ready for a change. And I don't know who the DNC was aiming for. I mean, maybe it was aimed at boomers. Maybe they thought boomers, for some reason, wanted to hear from Michael Bloomberg. But I don't think that's it. Because, I mean, look at him. He slathered the country in flyers and ads and still, could not get anybody to vote for him, because people genuinely dislike him. And so I think those speeches, those Republicans or billionaires like Bloomberg, it's aimed at the donors. It's aimed at the donor class. And that's what is, funding the Democratic Party. And that's what I think some people who are, heads of the Democratic Party think the purpose of the party is. It's not to serve the people. It's not to help them. It's just a money machine. And this is just one aspect of it. That's dangerous in normal times. It's dangerous in a flawed democracy. It's just atrocious behavior in an autocracy, and especially when, despite all the things that are happening, people should go out and vote, and it's going to be difficult to vote, and you're going to need to be motivated to vote. And I just think they're not doing that. They're working against their own interests and against the interest of democracy in the country as a whole. And I wish that someone would stop them, because at this point they're a danger. They're not just inept. They are enabling a kleptocratic regime, and that's a very serious thing. They're preventing basic goods and services like the Postal Service from being delivered. They're accomplices. And so, we're down to the wire with 2 months, and, I hope change is around the bend, but the refusal to admit that this is happening, I think, has been a major obstacle, within the Democratic Party.
Mm-hmm. And, I feel like if the argument that Trump is terrible was enough to win it would have worked last time. It was not enough to just have somebody other than him. And I think their biggest lacking right now is a reason, like a affirmative thing that they can give people to latch onto why they want to vote, not just why they don't want to vote for the other person. And I I just wish they would find their, I don't know, historical roots that they've seen, I don't know, seemingly gotten away from.
Yes, it's so strange. And, I do think that the 2016 election was rigged. I think Trump, was enough to drive out people to vote against him, even people who didn't like Hillary, who were holding their nose to vote for her. I also think this election is going to be rigged. But what people need to show is overwhelming turnout. They need to have some kind of avenue of transparency, of saying, yes, we did vote in massive numbers. No, we are not going to accept autocratic rule. Like, that needs to be as transparent and objective as possible, because after the election, this is going to get dragged out for months. I think at the least, we're going to have violence on the streets. We're going to have long, protracted arguments in the courts. And so the people need to make their voices heard. And the fact that they won't, not just that they won't sort of, quote, give anything to the progressive wing of the party, but what they don't want to give, it's so stupid in terms of the future. Like, why aren't you accepting the Green New Deal? Why would you not want a policy that protects our environment, that prevents an existential disaster for mankind, and that also provides jobs to people? And there are others, who vouch for this plan. There's like Jay Inslee, who helped develop a longer version of it. There's Elizabeth Warren. It's not just AOC. They like to do this thing where first of all, they present AOC as so young and so naive, and she's not at all. This is somebody who's done her homework. This is someone who's a good researcher, a good speaker, who's invested in these issues and who has taken care and consideration in what she says. But she's also backed up by other experts, and you still see, the party just dismissing universal health care as unattainable things. And it's like, this isn't like a treat for young people. This is something that we need to survive. Like, we're literally looking into a future of decades of incredible hardship, just based on climate change alone. And the fact that they truly don't seem to care, they often seem in line with, what Trump and his apocalyptic goon squad are seeking, which is basically depopulation, like a perverse view of mankind. Like, I think in their eyes, it's social Darwinism. They think, oh, these people deserve to die. They're weak, they're poor. It's an extension of the most cruel, sadistic elements of the Republican Party, that we saw progress through the 1980s up until now. It's not something new, but we've seen just how far they'll take it, I think, with coronavirus, and that people aren't reacting with proper urgency and a desire to help people and prevent these catastrophes is very alarming.
Yeah, boy, that it's really, I mean, the one thing that you can say for this pandemic is it's really like shown how broken our system is, but it's still like they don't want to like address certain things. Like, it's like, here's one $1,200 check.
Yeah.
Good luck.
Well, they won't go after Mnuchin. That's concerned
yeah.
me for a long time, because I think he's one of the most corrupt and dangerous members of this administration. And obviously that's saying a lot when you look who else is in there. But also the Treasury was hijacked by Russia in 2015 during the Obama administration. BuzzFeed did an expose about that in 2018. And there was initially, a FinCEN investigation, an internal investigation of the Treasury. All that happened from that is they ended up arresting the whistleblower. But we have a really compromised Treasury where the money is basically being, it's incredible wealth redistribution to oligarchs, to plutocrats, to billionaires. And that is what Steve Mnuchin spent his life doing in his private career. He was somebody who benefited from Bernie Madoff's Ponzi schemes. And now he's doing it at a national level. And the way they do it, corporate raider style, is, you break it and then you strip it down for parts and you enhance your own wealth, and everyone else can go, trying not to swear, can go to hell, basically, in their eyes. And
Sarah, you can swear. It's fine.
There have been early on, I think it was Representative Jackie Spear, she wanted to investigate Mnuchin. I know she wanted to investigate someone, so the story holds up either way. But then a partner of a Russian oligarch, Len Blavatnik, who worked with Oleg Deripaska and with other sanctioned Russian oligarchs who no one is supposed to be doing business with, made the biggest donation to the DCCC in its history in 2019. And suddenly the investigations stop. the talk of impeachment stops. Like everything grinds to a halt. And there was enough of a fuss raised that they returned that massive record-breaking donation. But I still wonder, like, these are the people who are in bed with Mnuchin. Like, this is part of the crime cult, and you're taking their money. Like, what is wrong with you? And yeah, they have not tried to enforce accountability for Mnuchin, for Barr, for Pompeo, for any of these representatives who are regularly breaking the law. And you have pretty cut and dry cases, and they always give the same excuse of like, oh, well, Mitch McConnell will shoot it down in the Senate. I'm like, so what? You still have to try. You still have to do your job. You have to at least inform the public that this is happening, that it is against the law, because that's what happens as people normalize it. You certainly see the media normalizing this extent of criminality in government. And then people think that because, the House is not reacting as if these are crimes, that maybe they're not crimes. Because if they were, surely Pelosi would do something about it, the FBI, what have you. It's the story of 2016, just over and over and over again, like to the point, I don't want to say I'm bored by it per se, because I'm more horrified and afraid than anything, but I am sick of having to explain it to people again and again and again. And I'm sick of watching no one learn their lesson, even in the face of mass death in America.
Well, I think it's the way they go about it that allows them to get away with it a lot of the time, because like Pam Bondi, okay, she's a registered foreign agent. I think it was Qatar, maybe. I don't really remember if the country. Anyway, she's speaking at the RNC at the White House, which is also a violation of the Hatch Act in and of itself, because they're doing campaigning on government property, so on and so forth. And it's just like one layer of corruption on top of another, until it's like, well, there's just so much in your face, you just throw your hands up and you're like, well, I don't know. It's like nobody's running in to stop them to do this. I guess it's okay. Like, I don't know. What's the penalty for that anyway? Like, and it's like, no, this is still wrong. Like, you can't do these things, no matter if they're doing it right in your face or they're doing it behind closed doors or they're making you aware of it or not. It's still wrong.
Yeah, exactly. And, they need to be relentless. They need to pursue every crime, every wrongdoing. Like, obviously start with the ones, that have caused the greatest catastrophes, within our government, threats to our integrity and threats to our public safety. You start with election integrity, with handling the coronavirus and the fact that they were hijacking equipment and trying to profit off of American death. You start with the fact that Trump is a Kremlin asset, and with the transnational crime syndicate, with which he and others in the administration are deeply intertwined. You follow the money. Those are all things that need to be done. They won't do that. They won't even do, the small things or the things that, may be referred to an old policy that nonetheless was put in the Constitution for a reason. Things like the Hatch Act or the use of inherent contempt. Our founding fathers, I don't think, anticipated this particular situation, but they did try to put in safeguards. They do have mechanisms that can be used to at least slow this process. I don't think that, the train of autocracy can really be stopped at this point, but I think you can put bumps in the road. They won't even do that. And I just have no idea what they're doing. Like, they're not doing anything for us. The Democrats, like the donor class Democrats, they're not offering us any policies that might help our life. And they're also doing nothing to stop this incredible, brutal hijacking of our country that's just carried out in plain sight. So I'm like, why are you here? And this isn't even about Biden. I don't even think he's, at all one of the worst ones. It's about a lot of the people surrounding him, though, and just the general atmosphere of timidity, of passivity, of lack of empathy, of acceptance of elite criminality as just the way things are, I guess. It's very hard to watch.
Well, that was Pelosi's cry before she finally gave in to impeachment, was that, the real impeachment is in November and we'll get him then. And it's like, I think they almost have resigned themselves to that fact. Like, we can't do anything until then. It's like, there's a lot you can do besides, and I know it doesn't feel like it always, but if you're elected representative, you can do more than the average person, and you should do that. Like, even if, like you said, let McConnell shut it down. Try anyway. What else are you there for? Like, go have another job if you don't want to do this one, like.
Yes, exactly. And I mean, that comment was bad when she said it, and it came with a host of other lies about how impeachment works, like he'll self-impeach, or I need McConnell's approval, is another thing. Like, a lot of people are very confused about the impeachment process because of that. But impeach at the ballot box was a particularly vile thing to say, given that we now know that, it appears vote tallies were changed. This story seems to have been buried somewhat, but government officials had been slowly admitting it over the last 4 years. Everyone knew Russia had hacked the machines, but they kept telling us this tale that, yes, Russia hacked your, election machines, which were connected to the internet, but didn't do anything. They didn't change the votes or anything crazy like that. I kept thinking, well, of course they did. Why would they go through the effort of going in there? And I thought, well, maybe they did something like they altered databases and exploited domestic voter suppression so they could turn away certain voters that were trying to vote, like they wouldn't show up as registered or something. It appears to have been worse than that. It appears to have been what Harry Reid warned about in the summer of 2016, where they're going to falsify election results. And Jenny Cohn is an election integrity researcher who's been studying this issue, for the past 4 years. And I just interviewed her for Gaslit Nation, and it'll be on next week. She says Pelosi has been aware of this since 2016. And I think an article somewhere, I think maybe Washington Post, was, put up to that effect. She knew that was a rigged election. And she knew that this election was also very likely to be rigged. I think everyone knew that. They knew it was a very vulnerable thing. They knew it was stupid to try to bet on the ballot box as if that's some kind of solution. And it's never an excuse for not doing your job. But there's something so malicious going on here that she would propose that as a solution to the American public, knowing full well exactly how vulnerable we are and how unlikely we are to have a free and fair election. There are worse things at play, I think, going on than folks initially realized.
Yeah, I actually had David Scheimer on the podcast a couple episodes ago, and he wrote the book Rigged. And
right.
It really goes a lot into that. And you're right. Harry Reid, you're looking good.
Yeah, he was
in your old age.
Voice in the wilderness, and yes, Jenny referenced his book as well as those Obama administration officials, who I guess were interviewed in his book, who said, they probably changed the vote tallies and it's an illegitimate election. That's a very big deal. And I kind of get why people never wanted to go down that road, because if you have an illegitimately elected president, and ostensibly, other members of Congress were illegitimately elected as well, then every decision made by them, every policy decision, every court appointment has to be re-examined. And then you think, well, what the hell do you do with this? If this person was put in illegitimately, does this make this appointment moot? I'm sure it's something people would ask about, like Supreme Court appointments, for example. But nonetheless, the time to confront this was 2016. And, after that election, along with Andrea Chalupa and others, we were pushing for a vote audit because we were suspicious of, the Russian activity in the election. We'd been warned about it by Harry Reid twice. So it's not like it came out of nowhere or something we came up with on our own. And they wouldn't pursue it. And I sort of get why 2016 came as a shock to people at the time, because it was an unprecedented situation and they didn't know how to handle it. It is 4 years on, and they're acting exactly the same. I feel like I'm watching a rerun of that terrible summer and fall, only with more violence, a pandemic, and a Great Depression economy thrown in. And it's very difficult to see, because we're going to be living with the aftermath of this election, no matter how it turns out, for the rest of our lives.
Yeah, and that's the thing too, is that he might be under indictment if he loses. I doubt he'll get any serious time or whatever. I'm sure he won't go to solitary confinement, even if he's whatever. He'll probably pardon himself before he leaves office. Who knows?
He would do that. I don't know if he can, but he would anyway. So
try. I mean, no, he's like,
why not?
whatever. Yeah, absolutely. Once he's pardoned Mayor McCheese and all the other the Hamburglar, and like he's gotten all them taken care of.
He's Thanksgiving, he'll do the turkey, and then
yeah,
he'll do
the turkey,
himself,
right?
And that'll be that. But yeah, I mean, he absolutely will. But of course, one of the reasons that he needs to stay in office, all of these dirty Republicans need to, it's not just to take money, to take power, it's to keep that immunity from prosecution. And at the moment, technically the only thing giving him that immunity is that stupid, that memo from the 1970s saying that a president can't be prosecuted. But I don't have any faith in Cyrus Vance's investigation and, Southern District of New York. But the New York Attorney General, Tish James, actually seems to maybe be really investigating and cracking down. And so not just he can be, vulnerable to state charges, but Kushner, Ivanka, others who committed crimes, within New York are vulnerable to that. I think Trump views a lot of his children as disposable people. I don't think he really cares what happens to like Donald Jr., Eric, Tiffany, or Barron, but he does care for reasons about Ivanka, and I think that maybe that's where his mind is, to the extent that his mind can look beyond himself in terms of protectiveness.
Yeah, I seriously doubt he thinks of other people as real, like they're just kind of cardboard cutouts or whatever. Like, yeah. No object permanence or whatever of other people. But what did you think of Kamala Harris as the VP choice, though?
I mean, I thought it was what they were going to pick. And, my stance on this is from the beginning, although I really wanted Warren, I felt like she would have just been an excellent president with actual plans, concrete plans, to fix this and an eye on corruption above all. Once she was out, I was like, whoever it is, like, that's who I am going to vote for, like Democratic candidate X and Vice President candidate Y. Like, that is who I'm voting for. I'm voting against Trump. I'm voting for a system of government. I'm voting for I'm voting for democracy over autocracy. And this is, the only route to have it. I don't know exactly what to make of her. There are some things I like. I like that she voted against, Trump's appointees. She has a very consistent record of voting against his policies. But I also think she's vulnerable to the donor Democratic class. I think Biden is as well. I don't know if she's necessarily the right person to stand up for Trump right now, but no one completely is. Like, you need a coalition. You need a broad coalition of people working together to build our institutions back up, to take out corruption from within. I appreciated, the line in her speech where she looked into the camera and said, "I know a predator when I see one." And I appreciated the shout out to transnational organized crime. I then went online, though, and tried to look at what Harris had actually done regarding transnational organized crime. She said she prosecuted, and I found very little. I found a case in 2014. I think she was still the Attorney General of California, involving drug cartels in Mexico and, crossing the border. And it's like, okay, that was her job. That's what she was doing. It's good she has some experience in that, but it's very different than what we're dealing with right now, which is this nexus of white collar crime, Wall Street crime, mixed with a transnational mafia syndicate, like traditional organized crime, mixed with corrupted institutions within governments. Mueller gave a speech about this in 2011 and then proceeded to do absolutely nothing to stop it. But nonetheless, it did leave a blueprint for people to follow. I don't know how much she understands that crisis or whether her skills and expertise carry over to handling that crisis. And one of the reasons I don't have faith in her handling it has absolutely nothing to do with her. It's because no one has been handling this crisis. Mueller didn't do it. Comey didn't do it. The Democrats didn't. The Republicans helped Trump. They helped the criminals. So I hope that if she does go down this road in a serious way, that she has the full support of all the other Democrats and institutional actors who really want to tackle corruption from within. She's very intelligent. I think if she tried, I think she maybe could get some things done, but you have to be very brave. It's a tough tough place to be in. This is the most brutal form of organized crime, and it's now infiltrated so many governments around the world that it's hard to, hold your own against it. And she's going to be under attack for a million reasons, for her race, for her gender, for being a Democrat, for the fact that we basically have Civil War II waging outside. So she has my sympathy in that respect, but she and Biden, they need to be realistic, because if they somehow manage to get in and Trump is actually out, first of all, that's a miracle. That means we're on the right path anyway. But then they need to not forgive and forget and move on. They need to actually prosecute these crimes, because if you don't do it, you end up with exactly what we have now, which is all the criminals from past crimes, whether Watergate or Iran-Contra or the illegal wars after 9/11 or the Wall Street financial heist of 2008. They're in the government. They're in Trump's cabinet. And if you don't prosecute them in real time, they just come back, and every administration is worse than the one that follows. And we don't have the time for this. We have the ticking clock of climate change above us. So we cannot screw around. They need to be very serious. They need to go in with a plan. They should consult with Elizabeth Warren. They should consult with Bernie Sanders about plutocracy. I mean, this should be a collaborative effort. That would be the best approach, the most powerful approach.
Yeah. And, something that worries me is that, what if Donald Trump said, to take one example, what if he was like, all right, I'm legalizing cannabis tomorrow, and I'm letting all of the nonviolent drug offenders out, if he or some other what you would think of as a liberal cause that that the Democrats haven't seized on, or what if he said for student loan forget, what if he actually did something, or some other Republican just went, well, we may not believe this, but who cares? We don't believe anything we say anyway. Let's just do something popular and take this issue away. That could so happen because they're not taking the bull by the horns here on a lot of these issues, and they're just leaving it open for someone else to, or it not to be addressed at all, even worse.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And, I could easily see that happening. I could see, cannabis vaccines being offered. I mean, they will make up anything. They will give you whatever,
whatever you want, whatever you want. You guys like
solution.
those, right?
But one thing that I'm worried about, and I've been worried about the whole time, I think Jared Kushner is the biggest threat in the government, even more so than Trump. And one of the things that Kushner has been blathering on about, completely facetiously, is criminal justice reform, which he doesn't care about at all. It's all rooted in the fact that his father is a convicted felon, and he doesn't believe that white collar crime exists. And he believes that people like himself are superior and his father is superior, and they should never be held accountable for any crimes. And he wraps this up with discussion of criminal justice reform that relates to, drug offenders, small-time offenders, the prison industrial complex, and so on. So, yeah, I could completely see him. I hope he doesn't listen to the show. Letting all of these. Don't do it, Jared. Just kidding. You'll lose. I could see them doing something like letting all of these people out and sort of saying, tapping into the hypocrisy of the Democratic Party and the timidity of the Democratic Party, and saying, we're going to bring the big changes and we're going to do this and that. I mean, it's going to be a hard thing because the prison industrial complex is so incredibly racist that it's very appealing to them, and they don't want to let a bunch of black and brown small-time offenders out on the streets, because maybe they do, because maybe then their white supremacist militias will have an easier time. I mean, this is just such a disgusting situation. I listen to myself and I'm like, Jesus Christ, the scenarios that I envision, they're plausible. That's the horrible thing, but they're also deeply horrific. But yeah, they may well do that. And that's another reason, even if you're going into a rigged election, you have to pay attention to policy, and you have to pay attention to principle, and you have to remember that people are watching you and they're thinking, I'm suffering. What are you going to do to alleviate it? Or I've been suffering now for 20 years. When are you going to do your job? When is anyone going to look out for someone like me? There are so many Americans asking that. And, that's why in the 2016 election, about half of Americans didn't vote. And then this time around, you have, a risk to life if you vote in person, both from coronavirus and very likely from voter intimidation, voter suppression efforts. And then you have a whole bunch of bureaucratic complications involving absentee voting, voting by mail. It's a big pain in the ass this year. I mean, you should still do it, but I do think to some degree, they do need to earn our vote, or it's like it's in their interest to put forth something that will get people excited and not in a personality cult kind of way, which is the way that they do politics. They try to create a personality cult around Biden and Harris because Trump has a personality cult. They need to have policies. I mean, AOC is the biggest fundraiser in the Democratic Party and has the most, social media followers than anyone for a reason. And it's not just her charisma. It's the fact that she speaks in plain English about policies that people find very appealing. And, it's as simple as that. But they're very reluctant.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I thought her speech after that thing with Representative Ted Yoho was exceptional. That was like, wow, that's like presidential level.
Yeah, she's extremely talented. And I feel like she's not recognized enough, for her intelligence. People are so, they're bowled over by her looks or her age or whatever, the fact that she's a woman. But, this is a serious contender. Like, this is someone who I can see, if we have a country, becoming, a president, or at least being in a position of high power in the years to come. And she should be recognized as that. But we have a gerontocracy. So I don't know. I think that a lot of people look at her, they look at others in their 30s and 40s as children, even though, this is like an old age in my mind. Like, I'm like halfway through my life, and I'm kind of like, come on, like, when are the people of my generation going to lead our country? Like, it's time, it's frustrating to watch all these septuagenarians and octogenarians, and some of them I like. I'm not trying to be discriminatory, but I do think that there's, they won't have the future that we will. They just won't. They won't be alive to see the ravages of climate change. They won't be alive to see decades possibly of us fighting off fascism. They won't live to see it. And when you're a parent, especially, and you know that your children are going to be raised in this world, I think on a gut level, like a primal level, you have a different reaction than, the Nancy Pelosi's and Joe Biden's of the world. Like, you just do. That's just how, how it rolls. And yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I remember one part in your book that kind of hit a chord with me was, just being a parent, and you like watch your kids, and it's like you almost can't let yourself imagine the future. You just have to keep going because it's not for you that you're trying to, I'm botching your words, but I'm sure you know the part I mean.
Yeah, no, I mean, you're not botching it. You have it. It's like, it's an act of mental violence in a way to yourself to try to envision the future and envision your children's future, because you don't want to think of them as living in pain. You don't want to think of them as suffering. And, we all know what's around the bend. And I've kind of felt like the purpose of, I guess like our generation, people in their 30s and 40s, like, it's to fight for that younger generation. That's why we're here, so that they don't have to experience the things that we have. And I feel like they already have such a hard time. I have a nephew who just started college, quote unquote. It's a kid conceived during 9/11 and who was like 6 when the economy collapsed, and like 12, when he witnessed the Ferguson uprising, and then 14 when Trump is elected, and now a pandemic is keeping him from, having a real college experience. And my heart just breaks for him, because I feel like, he has seen so much hardship in his life, and he's only 18 years old. And then I think, my God, what are my children going to see? And that's very hard, because I want to protect them, but I also need to be realistic. And so I feel like one of the most realistic things we could do as parents is to acknowledge, the severity of the crisis and work as hard as we can against it. And it might mean our own lives, become difficult. They're certainly painful to contend with. And it's not that there's not moments of joy in there. There are, that's what we're fighting for, are those moments of joy. But we have an obligation, this is like our sacrifice, and that's just the way it goes. And in some respects, we were lucky that, we got to see the world we did, before coronavirus, before climate change. We know what things can be lost. We know what that loss feels like. And so, we have an obligation, I think, to try to ensure the younger generation has to feel as little of that same sense of loss as they have to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, do you have any books or TV shows or movies you want to recommend to people who are in quarantine still?
Well, we're watching X-Files now as a family, but before that, we watched all of Lost, and do you remember Lost, like from like a decade ago? Like,
Sure.
and I loved
forget
it,
when I
man.
stopped. I think I stopped watching about halfway through. I need to go back and
So
finish
did
it.
I. Big mistake. I stopped watching basically when I got pregnant, and I started falling asleep every night at 7, and my brain could not like handle Lost and graduate school at the same time. But we watched the entire 6 seasons, and it's an amazing show. It's a beautiful show. It is the perfect quarantine show because they are all trapped and confused, and they don't know what's going on, and everything is horrible, and everything keeps changing randomly, but they find some kind of comfort in each other. So I became like obsessed with Lost. I started reading all the like Lost blog posts of like 2008. You know, I was like on someone's like GeoCities page or something, or the Live Journal. Anyways, I'm watching that, and now we've moved on to X-Files and giving my kids the classic sci-fi education. But it's family night. It's a weird thing, I think, for TV to stop. There's no fall TV season. All these kind of ritual parts of American life are also gone, so that adds to the feeling of disorientation. But we do have these older shows, and can kind of anchor you in some sense. So yeah, I'm promoting someone else's show. I'm just doing Gaslit Nation, and I have my book. I have Hiding in Plain Sight, which remarkably came out 4 months ago. I feel like it's been several centuries.
I know.
So yeah, go get that, and you'll get an even grimmer version of this conversation in book form. So there you go.
Absolutely. Well, I always like to leave people on an up note, so I think you've accomplished it. But
all right.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time. This is your 10th time being on the show.
I think so. You have an archive, man. If something happens to me, if what happens to journalists happens to me, you should sell this shit. You can like make bank. I'll feel good. I'll be like, I went down for a cause. Anyway, it's getting really sick and morbid.
If they ever start doing those deep fake things, I think I could make you say pretty much anything I want because I've got so many recorded hours of you talking now.
You've got the power. I think you might have, because I've done a lot of interviews in the last 4 years, but most of them aren't like an hour long. And I think you have the largest collection of like hour-long interviews. You just watch me get more and more depressed after every year. But yeah, I should watch out with that deep fake shit. I didn't think about that aspect. I gotta go now. No,
I know, right?
All right.
Well, hey, thank you so much. Have a good rest of your night, and I'll talk to you soon.
Hey, good talking to you. Bye.
Bye-bye. Join the Rob Burgess Show mailing list. Go to tinyletter.com/The Rob Burgess Show and type in your email address. Then respond to the automatic message. Also, please make sure to comment, follow, like, subscribe, share, rate, and review everywhere the podcast is available, including iTunes, YouTube, SoundCloud, Stitcher, Google Play Music, Twitter, Internet Archive, TuneIn, RSS, and now Spotify. The official website for the podcast is www.therobburgessshow.com. You can find out more about me by visiting my website, www.thisburgess.com. If you have something to say, record a voice memo on your smartphone and send it to therobburgessshow@gmail.com. Include voice memo in the subject line of the email. Also, if you want to call or text the show for any reason, the number is 317-674-3547. Until next time.